In 2021, there was a balance in the Power Five conferences, a happy medium, but that was all about to change. In July of 2021, news started circulating that Texas and Oklahoma were starting to talk to the SEC about joining the conference. In July 27, 2021, Texas and Oklahoma applied for SEC membership. Then in July 29th, SEC votes unanimously to invite Texas and Oklahoma into the conference. On July 30th, Texas and Oklahoma accept the SEC invitation. Now, however, though, they wouldn't join until 2024 to 2025 season, though. On September 10th, 2021, the Big 12 voted to add BYU, Cincinnati, Central Florida, and Houston, and it passed. Well, okay, it looks like we're all good. Sure, these moves might screw up the group of five conferences and cause a domino effect there, but who cares? It's not like there'll be any big moves in the near future. Well, crap. I guess we have another one. UCLA and USC joining the Big Ten. Well, that's an odd one. They're all the way out west. That ain't regional at all. Well, I guess the Pac-12 is just going to have to grab some teams from the Mountain West. So we're fine for now, I guess. What the heck is going on? Washington and Oregon are joining the Big Ten? That's 18 teams. What is going on now? Colorado, Utah, Arizona State are going for the Big 12. That leaves us with four teams: Washington State, Oregon State, Stanford, and California. Wait, Stanford and California are joining the ACC? Well, that ain't very Atlantic, but okay. But besides that point, the entire Pac 12 conference just collapsed. The college football world has changed as we know it. Well, it seems the dust has finally settled in 2024 season. Will be start of a new era. The Power Four conferences and the new suing against the ACC with the court ruling in favor of the ACC. The ACC is pretty much secure until 2036. With the Big Ten just adding Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, and up to 18 teams, the ball is in the SEC court to make their next move in possible conference realignment. Now, there are two teams left out of this big move: Washington State and Oregon State. Now, the Big 12 commissioner stated that he feels like 16 teams is the perfect number, so they won't be going to there. The SEC and Big 10 will not be going for them as they're not prestige enough for their conferences, which leaves the ACC left, who has 17 members. But this also goes in other sports, so they also actually have 18 members when including Notre Dame. Overall, so the move to 20 teams would be a big adding them in. So I don't feel like they'll add them at the moment unless they have teams like Clemson or Florida State or Miami leave, then they'll add them in. Alrighty, so let's begin. In 2025, the MAC will add UMass. Now, in order to have 14 teams instead of 13 teams, the MAC could possibly add UConn as they are the last independent school besides Notre Dame. If this move is to happen, Notre Dame will be the last independent school in FBS level. Now in 2026, I believe they will make their choice Washington State and Oregon State. With their 2-year plan or 2-year season incorporation, with the Mountain West being done then, and let's say if no other Power Four conference hasn't reached out to them at this point, I do believe they would apply for Mountain West Conference membership so they can be in a conference and not be an independent. Now, sometime in between 2026 and 2030, I can see the Mountain West Conference trying to expand elsewhere and most likely add possibly UTEP in New Mexico State in order to secure New Mexico and also put a foothold in Texas and to expand their conference as to keep up with the other conferences such as the SEC and Big Ten. Now, obviously, they won't be able to compete at their level, but adding more members will secure that their conference is next on the dinner plate. 2026, 2030, after the Mountain West Conference made a stab at Conference USA, and the American Athletic Conference will possibly then go after Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, Louisiana Tech, and Liberty to also expand their market into two new states and get the best out of the conference that is left. With the addition of these four teams, the American Athletic Conference can secure its destiny for the next 10 years, most likely, when coming for the new conference expansion that happens, and will rival the Mountain West Conference now as the best group of four member now. With four members left and down to five members, adding teams from the FCS won't work this time as the Sun Belt will be coming to possibly add FIU, Sam Houston, Kennesaw State, and Jacksonville State. And Delaware will then probably go to the MAC as that makes the most sense for them. Now the year is 2030, and there are 8 conferences left with a group of 5, or the group of 4 members now, as they'll be called, without Conference USA. Now the dominant conference out of these is most likely to be the American because of its size and numbers. However, the Mountain West Conference is still near there, and alongside the Sun Belt with 18 teams as well. But for the MAC, they're at the bottom of this list now. When looking at these numbers, we can see that the American Athletic Conference and the Sun Belt are both at 18 now, which is the Big Ten. But however, this will change as the clock is ticking for when the ACC will inevitably implode when the 2036 contract is done with TV deals. And so at this point, the SEC is probably most likely to make their move soon within this time and so long for the Big Ten, while the Big 12 and ACC are probably preparing and getting their list of teams that they're going to pull from the smaller conferences. In 2032, the SEC is going hunting as they're going to as they're most likely now, not most likely, but whoever they're going to add, is I can see them adding Oklahoma State and Kansas and Utah and Arizona, and that way to expand their market out west and also be able to get Oklahoma State as they're also a great school, get a foothold in Kansas, and also, as I said, get their stake out west against the Big Ten in that time zone too. Now, this is obviously not a shock to the Big 12 as immediately now they're most likely also calling up teams like Oregon State and Washington State immediately first to get their conference to 14 teams, while they'll most likely look into the next members they'll add. The Big Ten reaction, the SEC expansion will then most likely poach Kansas State and Colorado from the Big 12. This would also screw over the Big 12 again as they would have to add new members too. All right, so the year is 2036 now, and the Big Ten and SEC have added their members in. Now, with 2036 is the final year of the ACC contract, meaning this is where it's about to implode, and the SEC and Big Ten are probably about to make their final stabs and become the ultra power conferences of college football. As the SEC has now made some establishments out west, it kind of seems like a north-south divide in this scenario here. Looking at these numbers now, we can see the Big Ten and SEC are both at 20 teams now, and then the two other Power Four conferences, not really on the same level as the SEC and Big Ten, have 16 teams each. Now, one thing we can notice that the Sun Belt is still at 18 teams, which is probably now they're the most powerful group of four conference team. Remember out there, we can see the AAC is stuck with 13 after the Big 12 had to take from them. However, this next move might inevitably break down another group of four conference, and it might be the American Athletic Conference or MAC next, or the Sun Belt could still collapse, or any of them really. The SEC makes their move. Adding Miami would make perfect sense as Miami is in Florida and already has some sort of ties to the SEC and are just seem like an SEC school in the Southern. Then we have Georgia Tech, who has had a rich history in college football back in like the 70s and 80s, and it was in the SEC before and would probably get a call for the SEC. Clemson, also a great school in college football too, and also Virginia Tech would most likely be added as Virginia would be probably going to the Big Ten and to get a foothold of Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech is not a bad of a school, and they have some. I think they have like a really cool football thing. If I'm not wrong, like yeah, the Big Ten will then take Florida State, North Carolina, Duke, and Virginia. Florida State will get help them have some recruiting class in Florida too, as long as get their stake down there too. North Carolina and Duke have great academics and would make sense to get the duo, and along with getting Virginia too. With the fall of the ACC, not exactly it falling, but having most members left, Louisville and Pittsburgh will then join the Big 12 then after they will also probably invite them too as they get a foothold there in Kentucky and Pittsburgh too. Now there will be a lot more changes in the conference realignment in the group of four, but I'm not or group of three. I'm not going to go into depth of that. But to sum it up, though, what's going to happen in this scenario is the American Athletic Conference is then going to collapse with the Sun Belt and the Mountain West and the MAC consuming the rest of it. With each of these three conferences having 16 teams each, the Mountain West, Sun Belt, and MAC. But we'll go over what teams are in there too, of course. Now in 2040 is when this would kind of end the conference alignment. Well, until this point, but here is the map of what the SEC would be, stretching out from the all the way from South Carolina out to Utah. Now here would be the structure of the SEC. Now there'd be four groups: the West, the Midwest, the East, and the South. Now, I would imagine that there might even be like a little 14 playoff system in the SEC, top 14s from each region advance something, but these pods, or we want to call them, would be mainly though for the teams to schedule though who they would play though, and I do have them listed out on who is the best, who I think would be the best from each one and from down there. So in the West, we'd have Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arizona, Oklahoma State, and Utah. The Midwest, LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss, Kansas, Mississippi State, Arkansas. In the East, we have Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn, Virginia Tech, Vanderbilt. In the South, you have Georgia. We have Georgia, Clemson. What was that? Sorry, guys, it went off my screen. Okay, Florida, South Carolina, Georgia Tech. There we go. Now we have the Big Ten. Now, obviously, we can see that the North is loaded with Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State, Indiana, and Purdue. Now, in the West, we have Oregon, USC, Washington, UCLA, and Kansas State, and Colorado. In the Midwest, we have Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Minnesota, Illinois, Northwestern. And then in the East, we have Florida State, North Carolina, Virginia, Duke, Rutgers, and Maryland. Now, the Big 12 is in an interesting situation. Yes, there's still four teams less than SC and Big 10 and are not anywhere near the prestige level, but they're probably considered the third best conference in college football now, as they do span all the way from coast to coast. And over there, we can see they have Oregon State, Washington State as some old previous Power 5 schools, along with Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, and then also having old schools like Louisville, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh, and Iowa State. This doesn't necessarily mean a stand like a this would be like a standings for their season, but this is just a little to kind of show you the teams in it and like East and West. And so in the West, we would have Oregon State, Washington State, BYU, Boise State, Baylor, Arizona State, San Diego State, Texas Tech, and UTSA and TCU. Then the East, we have Iowa State, West Virginia, Louisville, Tulane, Houston, Pittsburgh, Western Kentucky, Cincinnati, Memphis, UCF. The most dominant teams in this conference, I feel like, could be probably be Oregon State, Baylor, Louisville, Iowa State, and maybe even Tulane. I think the mid-level teams probably like your. Did I say San Diego State already? I might have, but Western Kentucky would be your Houston. Some of those teams might be your mid-level UCF, Memphis, but the weakest team in here might be UTSA. Here we have the new ACC. As you can tell, that they consumed a lot of teams in Virginia and old Sun Belt teams too, to stretch from coast to coast too, and we'll be going over the teams they have. Now I know there are like not even. There's 4-5 and 5-4, but this is just like to kind of show you what the conference looks like. So in the West, when we have California, Stanford, SMU, and Southern Miss. In the South, we have Coastal Carolina, Georgia State, Appalachian State, South Florida, and East Carolina. Then in the East, we have North Carolina State, Wake Forest, Marshall, James Madison, and Liberty. In New England, we have Stanford, or not Stanford, Syracuse, Boston College, Army, and Navy. Now, we won't be going over much into depth of the other conferences, but here on the map, that can be in episode 4. We can go over that, but here we can see that this is what kind of remains left. Now, the MAC is still pretty untouched, and the Sun Belt Conference is kind of, you can tell that they've kind of lost a lot of members too and consumed the American Athletic Conference, and so has the Mountain West, as they also lost some members and they got into Texas. If you made this far into the video, please, and you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to please leave a like and a subscribe. That would really help out the channel, as we're nearing 1,000 subs soon, as we are 200 away as of recording the video, and it will help out the channel tremendously. And as I would love to share you all my thoughts on college football and more,